Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So we gonna present the economic problem in Australia. So here are the group members.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. Nama saya Muhammad Ramadan Muhammad Noor.
Nama saya Muhammad Azhar Fahmi bin Muhammad Zawawi.
Assalamualaikum, nama saya Muhammad Hakim bin Abdul Razak.
Assalamualaikum, nama saya Muhammad Syatul Azmi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Firdaus bin Abdul Halim. So I would like to present about macroeconomics in Australia. That is, first let us know about Australia. Okay, Australia, as you all know, Australia is one of the countries that has a good economy in the world. So during 2020, their luck has gone out because they have their second recession. And their first recession is at 1991, their first recession, and during 2020, the recession strikes back. So the global economy changed because of the pandemic that caused a huge effect, including to Australia. So Australia officials said that the economy decreased 7% during 3 months that ended in June. So it is a worst performance since the government began keeping the records in 1959.
So next is analyzing the current macroeconomic problems in Australia. The first macroeconomic problem in Australia is inflation. Inflation as measured by the Consumer Price Index reflects the annual percentage change in the cost to the average consumer of acquiring a basket of goods and services that may be fixed or change at specific intervals, such as yearly. First, due to globalization and increasing competition in both domestic and international markets, firms' pricing power may have been eroded. Second, inflation expectation may have become more firmly anchored, particularly if the public believes that the monetary authorities will successfully resist any persistent movements or inflation from this level. Third, increases in productivity growth may have been raised the rate at which economies can grow without encountering inflationary pressures. The second macroeconomic problem in Australia is unemployment. Changes in monthly hours work from the start of recession. The unemployment rate in Australia is expected to be at historically high levels because of the COVID-19 health crisis and policies associated with social distancing, means that since the COVID-19 pandemic, it impacts so much on Australia economic. Youth unemployment is generally twice the general employment rate. Tasmanian youth unemployment is likely to reach 20 to 30% by the end of the year, as the main industry affected by the crisis are tourism and hospitality, which employ a large share of young workers, means that many of young workers from the sector tourism and hospitality are from youth, teenager. Because of the COVID-19, it impacts so much on the sector. This will have a significant impact on future skills and social costs for years to come. Yes, it is true, because if youth don't have any experience, don't have any skill, it will affect and impact so much on the economics. So, there is it.
Appropriate measures to overcome the macroeconomics problem. Macroeconomics policy is concerned with the operation of the economy of whole. The key pillars of macroeconomic are fiscal policy, monetary policy, and exchange rate policy. First, income policy. Fiscal policy. Fiscal policy operates through changes in the level and composition of government spending, the level and types of taxes levied, and the level and form of government borrowing. Under current institutional arrangement, fiscal policy is the only arm of macroeconomy policy directly controlled by government. Fiscal policy can reflect discretionary action by government of the influence of the automatic stabilizers. A fiscal stimulus package is an example of discretionary action by government intended to support aggregate demand by increasing public spending and or cutting taxes. Fiscal policy can also be framed against longer-term objectives. This can include ensuring the long-term sustainability of the budget and its capacity to meet future challenges, such as population aging, and seeking to increase the long-term growth potential of the economy through investment in areas such as infrastructure and education. In Australia, the conduct of fiscal policy is subject to the Charter of Budget Honesty Act 1998, which imposes a formal requirement on the Australian government to set out and report against a medium-term fiscal strategy. This framework is required to be based on principles of sound fiscal management, including having regard for government debt and the management of fiscal risk, the state of the economic cycle, the adequacy of national saving, the stability and integrity of the tax base, and equity between generations. Monetary policy. In Australia, the Reserve Bank of Australia (RBA) board is responsible for setting monetary policy. Monetary policy decisions are implemented by changing the cash rate, the interest rate on overnight loans in the money market. The cash rate is determined in the money market by the forces of supply and demand for overnight funds. If demands pressure are building up in the economy, reflect in rising prices, the RBA can tighten monetary policy. The rapid dampening demand, conversely, in the face of weak demand reflected in deflationary pressure, the RBA can loosen monetary policy to support economic activity. However, it is important to remember that monetary policy can exert an influence on the macroeconomy even when interest rates are left unchanged. What matters in the lever of interest rates? In pursuit of this objective, the RBA aims to maintain inflation between 2% and 3% on average over the economic cycle, thereby anchoring inflationary expectations. By targeting low and stable inflation, the RBA seeks to encourage strong and stable economic growth. Exchange rate policy. Exchange rate policy is concerned with how the value of the domestic currency the relative to the currencies. In response to the mining boom, the Australian dollar appreciates, which help average inflationary pressure and make sure the economy receives the price signals needed to facilitate the flow of resources to the mining sector. The dollar also can spread the benefits by increasing the purchasing power of households. However, a number of sectors of economy like manufacturing can be affected by the high exchange rate. And lastly, the Australian dollar recently depreciated. This can be improved by the international competitiveness of Australian export and import competing industries.
Okay, next is price control rationing. Price control rationing is a binding price ceiling will create a surplus of supply and will lead to decrease in economic supplies. Key point: a price ceiling has an economic impact only if it is less than the free market equilibrium price. An effective price ceiling will lower the price of a good, which decrease the producer surplus. The effective price ceiling will also decrease the price for consumers, but any benefit gained from that will be minimized by the decreased sales due to the drop in supply caused by the lower price. Prolonged shortage caused by price ceiling can create black market for that goods. Price ceiling is an artificial set maximum price in a market. Black market, trade that is in violation of restriction, rationing or price control. A price ceiling will only impact the market if the selling is set below the free market equilibrium price. This is because a price of selling above the equilibrium price that will lead to the product being sold at the equilibrium price. A price ceiling will also lead to a more inefficient market and decrease total economic surplus. Economic surplus or total welfare is the sum of consumer because producer surplus. Consumer surplus is the monetary gain obtained by consumers. They are able to purchase a product for a price that is less than the highest that they are willing to pay. Okay, next, rationing. If a ceiling is to be imposed for a long period of time, a government may need to ration the good to ensure availability for the greatest number of consumers. One way the government may ration the good is to issue ticket to consumer. Okay, supply side policy to increase productivity. Supply side policy are government attempt to increase productivity and increase efficiency the economy. If successful, they will shift aggregate supply to the right and enable higher economic growth in the long run. There are two main types of supply side policy. First is free market supply policy. Second is interventionist supply side. In free market supply side policies involve policy to increase competitiveness and free market efficiency. For example, privatization, deregulation, lower income tax rates, and reduced power of trade union. Second, interventionist supply side policy involve government intervention to overcome market failure. For example, higher government spending on transport, education, and communication. Increase in saving. The following is a stylish description of the conventional view of the effect of a fiscal expansion where, for example, the government reduced tax with no planned reduction in current or future expenditure. In the short run, the effect of the government reducing tax is to stimulate consumption, which can increase aggregate demand and in turn aggregate supply. This boost of consumption is partly offset in the short run by a range of crowding out effects. By higher interest rate, reducing the level of investment and or an appreciation of the exchange rate reducing net exports. In the long run, the higher interest rate reduce capital accumulation and adversely affect growth. Based on the insight that lower tax and a budget deficit today require, in the absence of any change in government spending, higher tax in the future. If individuals are sufficiently forward-looking, they will understand that their total expected tax burden is unchanged. As a result, they will not increase consumption, but save the entire tax cut to meet their expected future tax liability.
For the last one is conclusion. As we can see, long-term growth of a country has a positive impact. And then, higher economic growth will lead to extra tax income for government spending. And economic growth can reduce poverty and improve standard living. Okay, now we can conclude in the end that relationship between inflation and level of unemployment. It is absolutely viable at the present scenario. Level of unemployment will be low and there will be more growing economic condition if economic growth is concerned. To eliminate the occurrence of this phenomena is absolutely impossible, which proves that long-term economic practice of different countries. But there are certain methods of regulating the growth of inflation and unemployment. With the help of specially designed instruments of state regulation based on the legislative framework, there are certain level of inflation and unemployment is necessary as it keeps the market in a balance. A country must go through stage stabilization. This will take at least up to 10 years, and only after that we can talk about achieving economic stability and full employment indicators. Thank you.